I can't even hear it.
I can't hear it at all.
Oh, that was just Bob O'Reilly for the intro music. We're doing something new this time with the podcast. It's video and it is recorded on Zoom. We're living in the Zoom world these days, but it's still the same podcast, the ShadowCast. We have a new host this year. Alex is the common host who has hosted with me for 3 years straight. But now we have Bobby Hunter here hosting. And Bobby, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being on.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you, man. Well, it's important that it's important that you're on because you just had something pretty enormous happen to you and your franchise today that we'll have to talk about. Because I remembered a few years ago having you on in my dingy North End apartment with Alex and David when you just pulled off the second biggest trade in League of Shadows history with none other than my co-host Alex. Alex, do you remember those days back in the original ShadowCast and that trade that looked so hopeful for about 3 to 4 days?
Yeah, I think that was the trade that really sparked this whole podcast because there was so much talk about it around the league. If I'm remembering correctly, it was basically Julio and Dalvin Cook, me getting from Bob in exchange for Le'Veon and Demaryius Thomas. So at the time, no brainer. I win it. Cook tears his ACL 2 days later. My season's over. But, we've got Bob back on again on the receiving end. Once again, I would say on the positive side of another big blockbuster.
Absolutely enormous blockbuster. And Bob, before we go through that with you, I just wanted to kind of go through the beginning of the year and what's changed for the League of Shadows in the last few months. Our owners' meetings were done via Google Hangout. Our draft was done at the same location as tradition honored, and it was the last time that we'll ever be at the O'Reilly compound in Brewster for the official LOS draft. And we'd just like to thank the O'Reilly family once again for a fantastic evening, as they always do, and thank them for their amazing support through all these years. They're really the engine that keeps the league driving. So really appreciate that. But most importantly, we really have to get into the league because we're 3 weeks in, and I'm happy actually we're starting the podcast 3 weeks in rather than just start off that first week. Because Alex, I remember we were going through a bunch of the matchups first week, and no one really knew what they had in their team yet. They were just a little hopeful. I remember David was very hopeful. Hope springs eternal, especially for him, and it never ends up well. But in general, we have 3 weeks in, and we have run the gamut. We have 0-3 teams. We have 3-0 teams. I don't remember this being such a league where there's a clear upper class, middle class, and lower class 3 weeks in. Alex, am I wrong? This is something we haven't seen in the league in a long while.
Yeah, I think you said it right. There's a clear upper echelon of teams so far, and it's 2 teams. It's Dark Knights and the Chafe Gentlemen. Chaffed, I don't know. The spelling's wrong. I think it's Chafe, but he doesn't know how to spell. But what I was looking at, I was looking at these 2 teams start, right? And they're on a historic pace. Basically, both of them are on pace to score over 2,000 regular season points. Nico's on pace for, call it 2,200, while O'Reilly's going to come in just under 2,100. So that got me thinking, where do these starts compare in terms of some of the best teams we've ever seen in the LOS? So I went back and I looked at, how many times has 2,000 points been eclipsed in a single season? And it's only happened twice, because it happened twice in 2011, but we all know that doesn't count. Ask Garrity, right? So it's happened twice. Once was in 2015 by someone that scored 2,015 points, our very own Ra's al Ghul. That's the second all-time leading regular season point total. Any guesses for who's first?
Warren, I bet Warren's AB team.
2015 Young Simba.
You're close. I looked that one up.
Oh, was it Here Comes Trouble in,
You had
17?
So Warren had just over 1,900 that year. The all-time leading regular season point leader, it's going to be a surprise to many. It's Patman Jones in 2014 with 2,060 points. However,
who won that year?
What happened that year? Yeah, you beat me to it. Guess who won the championship that year? So,
Wow.
Point being that, we've never had two teams eclipse that mark. It's only been done twice ever. These two guys are on pace to do it right now. Obviously, things change in a flash in fantasy. We all know that. But, yeah, those two are going to pace the league for the rest of the year, and it feels like the rest of us are going to be trying to play catch up with them.
Yeah, we're chasing their tail, right, Bob?
Yeah, I think right now the NFL had the most points scored in the first 2 weeks, so that kind of makes sense. I don't know if it's the hard counts, the no fans, or the defenses just aren't.
Not a lot of holding calls either, from what I've heard. A lot of no holding calls, and I don't know if that's something that they've particularly been trying to make sure to have less of this year. But it's definitely helping the offense, and it's an offense-driven league, and we like that. We just saw that on Monday night. We saw it on Sunday with Dallas and Seattle, and let's hop into. Forget it. Let's not tease it anymore. Let's get right into it, Bob. Today was a big day. It was a big day for the Ra's al Ghul franchise, one of the most storied franchises in League of Shadows. The first overall pick was traded today. It's Christian McCaffrey. Right now he's out with a high ankle sprain. But just walk us through your mindset, when the injury happened the week after, and what drove you to make a trade on Wednesday, September 30th, 2020?
So I actually found out McCaffrey was hurt from you. You texted me McCaffrey or some shit like that, and I was just like, "What?" Like he just scored, right? Because he came up limping after his touchdown. I got the classic injury text, which almost made me throw my phone through the wall. Once I found that out, I figured just the high ankle sprain on a bad team. He just got paid. I needed to get rid of him. And O'Reilly was actually the one who approached me. He was like, "Is Christian on the market?" And obviously I'm always down to listen to trades. So he was offering, I think like Devin Singletary or Mark Andrews. So I countered with, I was like, I'm going to need Tyreek or Metcalf involved, just because I didn't really love my wide receivers. Godwin's hurt. Boyd's been doing okay, but Hollywood hasn't. Anthony Miller's kind of whatever. So then I texted Alex, actually. Alex and Nico acquiring about Ridley from Nico, and then Lockett from Alex, interesting enough, because he was just dealt from you. So you could have been involved in this, Warren, if you held on to Lockett before he went off. And then approached Jack about Devontae, and ultimately that was the guy that got it done.
The best offer, and so I mean that's something that, because it's funny. We go back last week, and Alex was.
We're losing you, Warren.
Yeah.
Sort of a one-on-one. But what Bob did was have a situation where he was exploring the half the league. And with a trade strategy like that, you got to like the type of offers you can get. I'd get overwhelmed personally. But when you were sending some trade offers over to Bob, what was your mindset in getting a guy like McCaffrey? We just heard about Bob's mindset in trading him. What was your mindset at 2-1? You are in that solid middle class. You're the bourgeoisie of the League of Shadows. What was your mind?
So if we're talking about, you're cutting out a little bit, Warren, but I think the question was my approach, and Bob approached me with that deal. But basically, I saw it as too risky. Like Bob said, McCaffrey just got paid. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. it's, who knows if it's going to be longer, who knows if he comes back and gets hurt again, especially if the Panthers are like, I don't know, 3-7 by then, or like out of playoff contention. Too many variables for me to give up, a top 12 receiver as I view it, which is why I'm surprised that Jack went as far as to give up Devontae Adams, who from my perspective, he's probably top 3, right? It's like Hopkins, maybe Adams right there if he was healthy for all 3 weeks. So interesting move by Bissell, although I will say I think it's a good buy low opportunity on Marquise Brown. You look at some of the games he has coming up, Washington, Cincinnati, Philly. Those are games that the Ravens are going to put up like 40 points apiece, right? So I don't know. I think it's a big risk and basically just not one that I was willing to take on, but apparently Bissell was, so more power to him.
Yeah, God bless him. And there's no doubt he's a top-notch player when he plays. Bob saw that week 1. Bob, you had that magical combination of Mahomes and McCaffrey. And now you get 2 guys who, one is a proven top 3 wide receiver when he's on the field, and you get Brandon Ayuk, who I think if he wasn't held on to by Jack would have been a big waiver wire ad this week. Would have gotten with the same sort of pricing that Justin Jefferson went, and Justin Jefferson went for $46. That's a segment we'll get to later. But overall, I think that the situation in the league with the text I've gotten and the text I've sent out just to figure out what the temperature is of the league, a lot of questions surrounding Jack's 1 and 2 start and willingness to trade a lot of his key talent to boost up the last 2, especially the last 2 weeks have been pretty brutal for him. Bob, did it take a lot of prying, or was it something that the foundation was laid pretty easily? Because I know in the situation with Alex and I, the foundation was laid pretty well, and it was just a determination of whether or not we were going to shoot our shot. What was the situation with you guys, with you two, where was there a lot of pushing, or was there kind of a solid understanding that, hey, I think this is going to get done, but let's just figure out who the extra pieces are going to be in the deal?
So Jack was hesitant at first. It was I was inquiring about Devontae, and he was hesitant. Devontae's got a bye coming up, which was kind of a factor into it as well. But yeah, I knew just from past years, Jack's been a McCaffrey guy. I think he had him on a squad once. And I feel like Jack's one of those owners that loves a player that's done well for him. Like, we'll always go back to that well, which is a good strategy for like Ross Hopkins, guys that he's had in the past. So I knew he was high on McCaffrey. He's basically a wide receiver and a running back. So that was the original trade. Then Jack was kind of hesitant on it, and I knew I had to get something done this week. I wasn't going to hold on to him. So I threw in Hollywood. I was like, all right, like, what if we got Devontae for Christian and Hollywood? And Jack was down. He agreed to that. He's like, all right, let's get this done, like right there on the spot. And then he kind of showed his hand a little bit, and I was like, oh, like he really wants to get this done. So I asked for a second player, basically just a 2 for 2, so I didn't have to pick someone up off the wire. So I was trying to get Judy. I'm really high on Judy, especially with Sutton out for the year. But Jack had Judy and Ayuk as his like keeper options from the 8th and 11th round. He was trying to sell me Sony, which I think is a very crowded backfield in New England, obviously. And then Mike Williams, who's a bum. So it ended up being Ayuk, and I have Debo, so I think it's a good little hedge there. If Debo misses another week or 2, I can just ride Ayuk a little bit, especially how banged up my team is.
Yeah, it's really stunning, Alex, when you look at, I mean, we talked about your Dalvin deal and how that was a tough hit with that injury, and you've had your own injury problems as well with losing the 2nd overall pick, with losing Saquon Barkley for the entire year right off the bat. And then now you have that dirty play with Chris Carson. If we could just kind of segue for a second to that Chris Carson hit. I saw your franchise, Great Eggs and Hamos, discuss this on Twitter, but I wanted to bring it to the pod. That was a dirty hit. I mean, I haven't seen something like that in a very long time on the defensive line, and everyone kind of knew it was a dirty hit right off the bat, right when you saw that replay. What was kind of the franchise's mood after seeing something like that? Because Chris Carson's been near and dear to your heart, and he's been a big reason for your early season success so far. Seeing a dirty hit like that, what's the clubhouse mentality? What's the franchise feeling about that type of, just dirty, disgusting act?
I mean, we're furious. We're disgusted. You said it, right? It's a horrible act. That play was like Carson's down, laying on his stomach, and I don't even remember the guy's name because he's so dead to me. I've removed him from my thought process, but like to roll over onto his leg, grab it, and then twist while Carson's laying there like completely still is such horseshit. So I don't know. I don't know if they punished him yet or fined him or what, but certainly deserves it. He should be suspended. And you see a lot of a lot of the pros coming out and backing that opinion as well, which is good to see. He'll probably have a target on his back one way or another the next time he makes it to the field. So it'll probably even itself out. But I mean, the injuries are tough. I'm hoping that, there are like ebbs and flows for these injuries for teams throughout the year, right? And I've gotten 2 or 3 right out of the gate. Hopefully that means I'm smooth sailing the rest of the way. I'd rather have it now, figure out how to deal with it, than worry about it, come playoff time. So I know there's some other teams that are in my position. Hopefully we can figure out how to adjust.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think, you talk about franchise mentality, Bob. Ra's al Ghul, a proud franchise dealing with all these injuries. The clubhouse, I know from talking to you yesterday, was pretty down. They just lost to a huge rival, to Patman Jones. And we'll get to him in the pretender-contender segment. And we know which way that we're going to land on that. But really, when this trade was made, you told me that there was going to be a full-scale celebration in the clubhouse, that even the injured guys were in there with doing their PT, working on with their cast, and they went crazy, right?
They were doing the choppa. All the boys were hitting it. They were loving it. They love the energy, bringing Devontae in. But yeah, I don't know.
Right? I mean, this is the type of move that says, hey, we're not waiting until next year. This is not a lost year. We believe in this team right now, right?
Yeah, I feel like I just had so many injuries with obviously McCaffrey, Godwin, Dallas Goedert, Debo, Le'Veon. Like I feel like I needed to do something. And I looked at my schedule too. Not to throw you under the bus, but your team is obviously on the lower half of the league right now. You're known to make moves, so maybe you'll make your way up. But I got Paul Yu. I got Nico, who obviously is a good team, but Kamara's on bye. And then I got Tom with Dalvin on bye. So I have like a somewhat winnable schedule coming up. So I didn't want to just sit on McCaffrey like on my IR and be 2-4. Maybe he comes back. So I felt like I just had to make a move. Yeah, but the boys are excited.
I mean, how can they not be? This is a situation that, this brings you back from the status where right after Monday Night Football ended and I ended up getting my first win of the season somehow, some way. Garrity said, R.I.P. Ross. And I don't know if he meant it just for that week, but I had a feeling he meant it overall, that this was kind of the beginning of the end for the franchise this year. And it was just going to get chalked up to one of those years that just didn't work out for Ross. And I think it's pretty important for the league. I think a lot of the energy, it's a big reason why we're on here tonight, is the big reason for jumping back into this is to get the energy up in the league. And, the league was more hyped than I'd ever seen it with this trade, and it was a fantastic thing. But with that, we're going to get into the segment everyone's waiting for. I had a discussion with Dark Knights before this recording, saying that we were jumping on, and Dark Knights called it state radio, communist state radio, because it was run by me, Alex, and Andy. And he said he's complained about never being on it, and I said, come on down. I can't tonight. So
Commissioner Woj and Simba, maybe the 3 loudest personalities in the league.
Yeah.
And hey, the invite's wide open. I'm sure we'll see the Dark Knights on here at some point soon, but he's, there's really no flies on him this year. We're talking about contenders and pretenders now, and we've already talked about it a little bit. We've hit on it a little bit. The contenders are pretty clear at the top. It's Chafe Gentlemen, and it's the Dark Knights right at the top. Alex mentioned that. But then we get into this segment where now Roz, I think, really, the Undertaker gif, back from the dead, full-on contender. There's no doubt about that nowadays. You have two solid running backs. You have maybe the best wide receiver core in the league, and this is what we're really talking about. So Alex, Bob will leave you out of it because you're a little biased, but I'd call Ruz. He was a contender before, and he stayed contender with this move.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. 2-1's a fine place to be right now. Getting Devontae to make this a legit receiving core. We know Raz has the pedigree and he's going to be there at the end, and he made a big move here. So, I mean, starting Greg Ward this week in the flex, that's a little shaky. I don't know about that one, but I guess that's where we're at. We all know Raz is going to be in the playoff mix, right? I'm interested in the team currently in the 6th spot here. Paula at your boy. What do you guys think about this team? This is, I mean, as if 2020 wasn't weird enough, we now have Chafe Gentleman leading the league and Paul actually still alive 3 weeks in. What do you guys think about this team? Is this team a legit squad here? Are they going to be fizzled out by midseason?
You want to go ahead, Warren?
Well, I'll just speak to the fact that we're doing a recording, Dad. Oh, that's my dog, Dooley. Hey, Dooley, quiet. When it comes to Paula at your boy, again, it is a weird year, but Paula has these years, right? He's got a good squad, and he was about to go 3-0 before it was a Lamar Boof last Monday night. And, it gave me my first win. It brought me back from the dead. I don't think 0-3 would have looked good for the rest of my team. I think I would have just gone into the mode I went into a few years ago where I was just trying to stay in that middle class and maybe, not focus on the playoffs necessarily, but really just aim for some sort of time when I'm able to kind of right the ship and wait till next year. But I like Paula's team. I think he has a good foundation. I think RB2 is a frailty for him, but his wide receivers are legit. Ezekiel Elliott, once he gets more involved, is legit. Bob, I mean, you have some solid takes on him. This is a solid team, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing him this week, and it looks like a pretty good matchup. I think Lamar obviously has way more upside potential than what he's been showing. He's been all right. Kenny Galladay's been hurt for him. I don't love J.K. Dobbins. I don't love that start, which I probably shouldn't be talking about right now. He might sit him for AP or something. But I feel like the Ravens' backfield is very crowded with Lamar, Ingram, Gus Edwards. I feel like a lot of those guys just kind of spread carries. So maybe J.K. takes over that backfield, but I feel like Paul will be in the hunt for this year for sure, like at least 5 or 6 seed. I'd be a little shocked if he didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Alex. You bring up Paula again, and my issues with Paula are the bench and the RB2. He has Tucker in the Bills as a kicker in defense. That's as solid as you're going to get in the league these days as a combo. So that's a huge spot for him to be able to put up solid points on a week-to-week basis. What are your thoughts on this bench? Does this bench have what it takes to keep going in this type of, in this kind of do or die league standings we have here, where we have that upper class, we have that lower class? What type of, are you lean towards contender status, but does that bench give you, a little bit of pause when you make him put him in the full-on contender category?
Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing here on the bench, right? We've got 2 pieces of the Detroit backfield. We've got Zeke's handcuff. We've got Greg Olsen, and we've got Frank Gore. Shout out. I'm glad somebody's rostering him. But I don't know. I don't think I've seen Paul use any waiver bucks yet. I would think, he's got 89 left. The time to do that would be soon, just to get some depth there. If one of those guys goes down, he's certainly in trouble. So based on that, I would actually lean more towards pretender. Sorry, Paul. I don't think this team's deep enough. I love Galladay. Paul robbed Galladay and McLaurin from me in the draft. I wanted both those guys. Didn't get either of them, which may be playing into my opinion about his team. But I think you're right about the depth. That's definitely an issue. The other team I think is interesting is one below him in 7th right now. We talk about the House of Pancakes here. So they've got 427 total points so far, which is good for 4th in the league. Yet he's 1-2. So he's kind of gotten, I beat him fair and square this past week, but he's kind of got, shafted weeks 1 and 2. What do you guys make of this squad? Contender or pretender?
Bob, what do you got?
I always think Landy's a contender, and until it matters. But at least for now, like obviously Landy knows football. He's always going to be making good pickups. I think his team's very deep. He just got AJ Brown back. I'm very high on Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs. And Diggs is playing well in Buffalo. I think, and Dak too. He's got a good team. I think Landy's gonna. I think we're going to see him go on a winning streak here, and I think he's going to be like a top 4 team by the end of the year, and he'll be a contender, and we'll see if he can pull it off this year.
Yeah, boys, I'm seeing this team, and I'm seeing kind of the antithesis of Paul. That's your boy. This bench is really good. I don't know what Tua is doing on the bench, but in general, the bench is really good.
Got to be a keeper.
Yeah.
Why else would you be holding
him?
them?
Some sort of keeper. It came out that Tua hasn't even been tackled yet so far this year. But hey, I can't blame that. But I mean, you have a backup in Gesicki, who's a legitimate tight end on any other team really these days with how tight end's going this year. And then you have KJ Hamler, who was a nice pickup on the waiver wire. You have Brandon Cooks, who's still a target guy on an offense that I think has yet to get really going. They've had a few tough weeks with a few tough matchups. But then you have Jeff Wilson, who I like a lot, who could end up being a good player. Ronald Jones, you never know. I mean, we're still trying to figure out contenders and pretenders in that Bucs offense still, right? So when you look at – and then Phillip Lindsay, he still has him. He's holding on to him. I like Phillip Lindsay as well this year. I can't trust Melvin Gordon year long in what seems to be kind of a lost year in Denver. So I'm putting House of Pancakes for sure in the contender category. Wide receiver 3 is my sticking point with Keelan Cole. I haven't even really kept track. He had a good first 2 weeks from what I see right here. So that's something in a passing offense consistently that you got to be happy with. I really like this bench, and I know, like Bob said, he's going to be in it right till the very end. It's a tough start for him, as you mentioned, Alex, but this is a really good team, and AJ Brown hasn't even got going yet. And we're about to see that offense really take flight with a little bit of AJ Brown in the mix. So I really like Dave's team and House of Pancakes. Look at them last year, right? This is an unbelievable team. You had them, Alex, you had to face off against him in the first round. Or you were about to, right? Or did John beat you and then John beat David?
Yeah, I lost to Buchanan, so Buchanan
right,
must have beat Landy in the first round.
So I mean, but Dave with the playoff pedigree, not the win yet, but this looks like a playoff team for sure. And we'll just jump down and get to the depressing stuff before we get to the funny stuff, because this doesn't seem to be funny at all. Towlett has been described to me as one of the saddest franchises in League of Shadows. And there was a legitimate gate that happened last week. Bob, as League of Shadows Woj, can you go into kind of what happened with that gate and where you think Moist Towlett's at even after that controversy?
I mean, I thought events were supposed to be 50 people or less. This is literally the Wrigley Brothers circus. That team is a clown show. That team absolutely is trash. I don't know what else to say. That team is fucking garbage. He might not win a game. He honestly might not win a game.
Alex, he might not win a game, and what it looks like to me, it just looks like a nice mix of a few bad injuries with the type of roster construction that you'd see out of a team that doesn't even want to be in this league anymore. I mean, we have some really good players. I really like this bench, and I like the team, but it's not constructed well at all. There's no alpha. There's no alpha receiver. Kenyon Drake was taken in the second. I mean, where has Moist gone wrong thus far? And is there really any way he can right the ship?
I don't know. I mean, you said exactly what I was thinking. When I look at his team, there's no glaring, here's where you messed up, right?
Right.
I think, well, I see one actually. T.Y. Hilton, that was a mistake. T.Y. Hilton
I mean, his
looks
grandma's
like he
literally
sucks.
talking trash on her own grandson at this point. What more is there to say?
Not good. Not good. Not good at all. So that looks like a waste of a pick. Unfortunately, like you got to keep him on your bench until he does something. And he was probably what, third or fourth round, fifth round. I don't know,
Fourth
something
round,
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Obviously Kittle being out hurts. Kenyon Drake hasn't gotten going for whatever reason, although I still think he's solid as an RB2 in the long run. I don't know, man. This is a weird team. I don't really understand. Like when you look at it, it just looks funny.
Right.
You said it, Warren, where are the alphas? Where's the guy that's like, ooh, I mean, it's Derrick Henry, I guess, but it just nothing pops at you. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the 0-3 starts are almost impossible to recover from, as we know. I know he's open to any and all trade offers, but I wonder if he's actually pursuing trade offers rather than just saying, hey, come offer me trades, which is a coward move. So it seems like he's more in that passive state of mind right now, which is not going to get you anywhere in this league. So hope the best for Moist, but not looking good.
No, and I think you said it. I think there's a bit of a lackadaisical attitude within that front office. It's been talked about consistently in this league that front office, once the games start rolling, can't maneuver well at all. It's the Titanic, right? It's a big, beautiful ship. You got an amazing captain that's been there a few years now and has a lot of experience. Got a lot of playoff experience too. No playoff wins yet, but a lot of playoff experience. But if you try to make a turn, all of a sudden you're going like this and you're already into the iceberg. It's already hit. And 0-3 is the iceberg. I mean, we're looking at this team and it's Robert Woods, who's a good player, but correct me if I'm wrong, he's not an alpha receiver. I mean, Alex, you have an alpha receiver yourself. You know that. It's Mike Evans. He's going to be there week in, week out. When he's healthy, he's going to be that touchdown guy for you. When you take Robert Woods and you have a few other guys there that aren't those alphas, like Darius Slayton, T.Y. Hilton, still not an alpha, Deontay Johnson, great pick. I know, Bob, you were on him very early in the draft process and really wanted him. And he looks good, but is he an alpha? We don't know that yet. So, there's a lot of developments that could make this team pop, but it looks like it might be a little too late. Bob, when you look at we talked about Mike Evans. I have, I pride myself on having a few alpha receivers myself when they're not injured or old as hell. But, what does having Devontae and even a Godwin, even though he's hurt right now, having an alpha receiver put up those 30-point days, those 25-point days, what does that do to the clubhouse? What does it do to a matchup that you see such a need for an alpha receiver that you went out and spent the best player in the league when he's healthy on getting a Devontae?
So I mean, obviously it's a PPR league, like with 3 wide receiver too. So like wide receivers matter in the LOS. I think I was like one of the first ones to draft 2 wide receivers. Like we obviously, when we originally started, we didn't really know we drafting quarterbacks and stuff, but once everyone started figuring it out, typically it's like running back. And you saw a shift in the NFL, and I'll pat myself on the back. I'm one to be cocky. Like I saw that trend early. Like I drafted Julio and Dez one year, and it was the first like back-to-back wide receiver. Everyone was shitting on my running backs, but it's a PPR league, and I think it's switched over recently. You see the McCaffreys, Saquons, even back to like Ray Rice, Le'Veon, the guys who get catches. So it did shift back to running backs. But like I said, with a PPR league with 3 wide receivers, I think it's very important to have big wide receivers on your team.
Yeah, it's a necessity, and we'll see what happens with Moist Towlett. But we'll hit the kind of the last one we want to hit before we get to our main segments here before we close it out. Let's hit on the defending champ, the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the other 0-3 team in the league right now. And they've been 0-3 before. There was a few years ago where they were 0-3, maybe even 0-4, and went on a huge run to make the playoffs that year, if I recall correctly. But when we look at the KCQs. What do you see? Give me some optimism. Let's get an optimistic stance from you and Alex, if you can. Take the pessimistic stance that says, 0-3, it's done. Let's call it. Bob, you can go first.
I mean, you just start with Michael Thomas. He's been out. He's the best wide receiver in football, even better than Devontae. He's a clear-cut number one, especially with Breeze checking down these days. Like, I feel like Devontae runs a lot of slants. He's going to be catching a lot of balls this year. Hopefully, I don't know. They got Aaron Jones is also having a good year. Matt Ryan, the Falcons look like they're playing from behind or in shootouts every week with Ridley, Gage, Julio, like all those guys. So I do see some optimism for him. I don't know about the Michael Thomas and Emmanuel start this week. I'm looking at his lineup right now. Also, you never know with Mark Ingram. Obviously, the Ravens running attack is very dangerous, but I do think that's a crowded backfield. I don't know. He needs to start winning some games quick though, because if you go 0-4, 0-5, it's very tough to climb out of.
Yeah, and Alex, it looks like this week, this is the perfect time for you to take the pessimistic stance because he could go 0-4 against you. What's your mind going against this franchise this week, knowing that he has that championship in his back pocket, but you're more than happy. I can only imagine that you guys aren't taking this 0-3 start to mean that there's nothing to this matchup. This is a huge matchup for you guys, and it's a statement game still to prove that you just beat the champ, just like Bob did week 1. You beat the champ. You are in the championship category this year.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get some revenge on him for knocking me out last year too. I mean, I think the pessimist's approach or perspective is a couple things that Bob said, right? Mark Ingram has had no more than 10 carries in any of the first 3 games. In one of his games, he had 15 points. In the other 2, he had 5.9 combined. So that backfield is an issue. I think they're going to spread that around. The other thing that's risky here is he's relying a lot on Mike Davis right now, which is going to be helpful. But theoretically, if Christian comes back in 3-4 weeks, then that's, then he's kind of hurting in the flex spot a little bit. He's got Raheem Mostert, who's out right now too. So he's got some options. I mean, the bench it's tough when you start out a take negative and then you start turning into positive, especially when you're playing them this week. But I see upside on the bench with Hines, Edmonds, Scott. Those guys are a couple injuries away from being fantasy relevant. My hope this week is Michael Thomas is not 100%, that Mark Ingram continues to stink. And, it's going to come down to Monday night. We got Matt Ryan, Aaron Jones versus Aaron Rodgers on Monday night this week. So should be an exciting one. Hopefully I've got a big lead by then because I think I will need it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's going to be a matchup to watch. But, Bob, I don't know if it'll be the matchup, as in game of the week. And we'd like to announce that right here, right now. Guy, would love to.
Let me take a look.
We'd love to hear, though. We got the suspense going.
I haven't looked at this yet.
Looking like a clear-cut option right now.
It's got to be the battle of the Friars, no?
That's what I was thinking. Have they been it, though? I want to make sure everyone's getting involved.
Patman Jones has not. TDK has not either.
We'll knock. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect.
We'll get Pat in there. So, all right. So it's going to be Patman Jones versus the Dark Knights. We haven't touched on Garrity's team. I know I like to shit on him.
This is the perfect opportunity, right? Yeah. So we have the game of the week set. It is the Friar fight, the Friar showdown. Patman Jones versus the Dark Knights, 1 versus 4. Let's hit on this matchup. We have Patman Jones, who, Bob, talk about it. He just brought you back down to earth with a win that really, if he lost it, I don't know if he could stay in the league. I don't know if he could even stay in your own apartment. There was some discussion about that early on on Sunday. But what do you see in Pat's team that made you interested enough to talk to him about trades, and what can he do against a very dangerous Dark Knights?
Yeah, if he lost to me last week, he wasn't sleeping here. He was sleeping on the street. He kicked out of the apartment. But I think he had a very good draft. Like, honestly, I think a lot of players slipped to him, and he was making all the right picks. I feel like sometimes he is a little like risk averse. Like he doesn't love reaching for guys, but he nailed it with Hopkins. Keenan actually surprisingly is having a good year. I've had him in the past. I don't like him. Deshaun's okay. Clyde looks really good. Juju looks good. I think he's got a good team. I was actually inquiring about Hopkins, and when I told him Devontae was pretty much a done deal, I think his ears perked up for a second, but at the end of the day, he couldn't pull the trigger. So that would have been an interesting wrinkle in the trade. But yeah, I think he's got a very solid team. If he can find an RB2, he's going to be very dangerous.
Yeah, Alex, early thoughts on this matchup. I mean, we know what the Giants can do from a points perspective. Is that sustainable, and what can Pat Man Jones do to knock the Dark Knights off the top spot and maybe take them down a rung or two, because they have acted a little too cocky for anyone's liking this early in the season.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the thing that sticks out to me with Pat Man's team is that Hopkins pick. I think going into this season and in our draft, there was this conception that he wasn't going to be what he was for the Texans, that Kingsbury likes to spread the ball around. But if you think logically, personally, I bought into that as well, but just think about it. It doesn't make sense. This guy's a stud. He's going to, get targeted 10 times a game. He's going to put up huge numbers. So getting him, I think it was mid-second round. He probably should have gotten picked over, Tyreek, Julio, other guys who got picked at the turn. That was a great value pick. When I look at Nico's team, I think about mainly James Robinson is the guy that sticks out to me. This is a guy that was post-draft sitting there, had a Yahoo update. This guy's going to be the starter, and nobody grabbed him. Nico scooped him up, and now he's looking like a guy that's actually going to potentially be a league winner in fantasy leagues. Some things that might be cooling off with Nico's team. Marvin Jones, I think, is going to become a little, with Golladay back, he's not going to be as reliable. Obviously, he's got some other options in Deshaun, I guess, he doesn't really have any other options. But Nico's team's rock solid. I think Garrity's team has a chance to take him down. He's got the star power: Hopkins, Watson, Hilaire, Juju, etc. Should be a good matchup, and I would love to see Nico go down.
Yeah, it's going to be funny to watch.
I got an interesting wrinkle on the James Robinson. Nico, so after the draft, I think Nico drafted the Jaguars running backs, like the backfield, and then he picked up James Robinson for $1. Garrity actually had a waiver on that, so he beat him by $1. So it's
wow.
Very interesting for this matchup and how the league might be a little bit different if Garrity had James Robinson.
Wow. I mean, this is a rivalry to be written down. I can just say it from my perspective, having Travis Kelce last year, having that stud tight end really does make a huge difference. And what Nico has done is he's surrounded that stud tight end, because when you get him in the second round, you get him at that point as when he did, you really have to hit on your wide receiver ones, especially when you take Kamara and then Kelce. You know what Kelce's going to be, but is he going to be that 30-point-plus guy that you take a Mike Evans with or something like that? And Nico knows what he has in Kelce. Kelce is a champion for the Dark Knights from 2 years ago. So there's some history there. And I think, there was discussions between Kelce and I after last year, but we went our separate ways. And I think we're both better for it because he really seems like he has a solid home at the Dark Knights. And it's a shady franchise. I think when it's all said and done, this isn't really this is a good franchise for the league, but you put a desperate 0-2 Moist Towelette team through the ringer like he did last week, getting Jordan Reed and then dropping him just savagely.
That was a ridiculous move. I kind of love the sabotage there, but it's one of those examples, man, of using roster to your strategic advantage. It's like holding a guy on your IR spot or something like that. There are wrinkles that the Dark Knights understand that a lot of people in this league don't. So kudos to him for taking advantage of that.
Picked him up and dropped him so he was on the wire so Diana couldn't get him.
Yeah.
Yep.
That happened. And, Alex, I say it too. I kid with him. I say that was a disgusting move, a disgusting act, the Joe Buck, Randy Moss thing. But in reality, I mean,
right.
This is the league. And if you don't put your full effort into it, for the money that could be gotten out of this, and more importantly, the prestige that comes out of a championship in this league, when you're not acting, you have Moist over there. And I know I did, external audit of the front office. The front office gets paid peanuts over there. They don't have any kind of analytics guys, no analytics in the office. Just kind of like a field-based old GM who kind of still thinks that it's 2014. It's not. And this is what happens when you think it's still 2014. You have a Dark Knights franchise that focuses on investments internally, and you have this type of thing happen to you. And, there was a lot of shit talking early on in that week where Moist said, I'm going to take Dark Knights down a peg. I love the shit talking more than anyone, but when you show up to the game and you put up 102 points, there's really not much else to say. And just from an early perspective, I lean Dark Knights in this situation. This is the toughest matchup he has yet, but DJ Moore has yet to pop. I think James Robinson is the real deal, like you said, Alex. And then you have Alvin Kamara, who, with Drew Brees, who can't seem to throw it more than 5 yards, and can't find Traquan Smith until the last ditch effort of the game. You have this situation where Alvin Kamara is the Lamborghini. He's the guy that drives the offense, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And you gotta keep an eye on the Dark Knights. This is going to be a fantastic year. And I'm going to say it now. If the Dark Knights doesn't win, this is the most disappointing year that the Dark Knights will ever have, because the pieces are in place. And Bobby, I mean, you can speak to that further, but I think, all the pressure is on the Dark Knights in this year. This is his to lose.
He's for sure he's the leader of the pack right now. Everyone's looking up at him. And credit to him for sticking with Kamara. I know he was starting to have second guesses, or maybe he was just playing on draft day, but he was second guessing Kamara a little bit based on the injury. But that looks like a very solid pick. But yeah, obviously, 3 weeks doesn't win you the season.
Yeah, and exactly right. 3 weeks doesn't win you the season, but with the amount of stuff he's talking, you'd think he'd won the championship already. But the weeks keep going.
What are your thoughts on your team? I feel like you're the only team we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, I think thank you for bringing that up. I think there might have been unconfirmed reports, but there might have been a mutiny had we gone 0-3 with what we were looking at early in the season. I've made a trade already with Green Eggs and Hummus, and Alex and I have talked about that a little bit, but I had to shore up my RB2 spot, and I feel like I did that. And I know I gave Lockett away the perfect time because he dominated for Hummus, but it was great terms. Lockett's been on the team prior. We have a great relationship, and we were very happy to see him go to a good situation. And we weren't disappointed with those results. We were actually happy to see it, but we weren't happy to see in that same game Michael Gallup get these cheap catches and cheap touchdowns that really made me think that 0-3 was a legitimate possibility. But after the win on Monday night, it really, I think this is what is turning the ship around, and you guys can opine on the team, but the strength is obviously wide receiver. We'll see if my bench wide receivers and my lower tier wide receivers are able to transfer into solid trades later on in the year. But this is a team built to kind of wade in the water, so to speak, for the first 5 to 8 weeks, and then make a big move near the deadline. But I like where I'm at right now simply because I got that win against Paula this past Monday. But it's I'm not going to start crying to you guys, especially about injuries, but football is a dangerous game, and this is what happens when you have a bunch of guys that have hamstrings that I think it seemed like the training staff is really sleeping on the job. So, but in general, I feel good, feel much happier being 1-2, and there's light at the end of the tunnel these days.
Yeah, I mean, you got Cam who's playing like MVP Cam. I think he's going to be solid all year as long as he stays healthy. Will Fuller looks good. I think he's the number 1 in Houston over Cooks. Allen Robinson with Nick Foles. Sanders will get going. Jameson's back. David Johnson, you secured at RB2. Higbee's good. Julio, I don't know if he's the number 2 behind Ridley, but that Atlanta offense will be throwing. So I think you'll be all right. And you're one of those owners that obviously picks up a bunch of guys like Landy. So I think you'll be all right. After 1 week, though, it does look like Alex won that trade with Lockett. I think Russ is going to be throwing all year, and Lockett's a superstar.
Yeah, Lockett's a superstar, Alex, and we can talk about that just for a quick second. Lockett was the guy for me that I told you I value him very highly, and he's a great man. But if I was going to make anything in this league, it would have to be betting on the guys that I need to bet on, and the sure thing had to be the one that was in the trade to be able to get back the package of Preston, who I still like a lot, and David Johnson, who I think in the next coming weeks are going to be showing up. But just to, giving up Tyler Lockett to you is tough after the first week of it. But we both, I think we can both rest easy on a night-to-night basis, knowing that was the right move for each of our teams.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think if you looked at our two teams before the season started, you could predict the trade was going to happen, right? I had 4 startable running backs. You had 5 or 6 startable wide receivers. It was bound to happen at some point. The fact that the returns after 1 week looked good for me because Lockett went off. David Johnson was going against a tough defense, but I think it filled exactly what we were both looking for, and that I needed some more explosive components of my lineup with Saquon out, and then you get a solid RB2 to, come after Miles Sanders that as his schedule eases up a little bit, he's getting all the touches. He should be rock solid. So like you said, think it's a win-win. The negotiation is funny that it, got hung up at one point about Curtis Samuel, which I just can't let go of the guy. But yeah, I think it worked out well for both of us and should pan out that way over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think so. We're the only Curtis Samuel truthers left in maybe the entire NFL.
Yeah, right.
But we'll die on that hill. But I do want to this is the last one before we get the quick hits with the Wall Street Minute and the yikes. But I do want to. We have to lend a lot of credit to Chafe Gentleman, the host every year. It's as Garrity calls them, the donation of the year. But it's not looking like the case. This is a legitimate team. You look down the aisle at his team, Bob, and he has a 1-2-3 wide receiver, a running back 1, running back 2, potentially 2 running back 1s, and the QB1 thus far. I mean, this team, this franchise could be coming out of the darkness this year.
Yeah, I owe O'Reilly an apology. I bet against him twice in Game of the Week. I was talking shit about his team after the draft. I thought hedging everything was just going to hurt him, but he looks like a powerhouse. I think finally the AFC East paid off for him. He's been drafting the AFC East for a decade.
The Josh Allen pick is looking like this year's Lamar pick. Like he's going to put up 30 points a week. That's insane that he picked him. I don't know when exactly, probably 8th, 9th round, maybe later. Right. So that's a steal. And
the DK
keeper.
The DK keeper. Yeah. Sorry. I couldn't find the word. He's a top 10 receiver. That's the thing with the McCaffrey trade. I was inquiring about DK and Tyreek. I think DK is a top 10 receiver, like a wide receiver 1. So yeah, his team looks very dangerous. So we'll see.
But even when you just look at that, Tyreek is wide receiver 1, DK's wide receiver 2, Edelman's wide receiver 3. That's as solid as you're going to get. And then don't forget about Mark Andrews either, who has had a little bit of boofage the last 2 games, but is still a tight end 1 when it's all said and done. I mean, he's a tight end 1 in that offense, and he's going to be a tight end 1, top 12 tight end when it's all said and done, I think. And then you look at the bench. There's just enough intrigue on the bench that something could pop. And I think he's in a very solid spot, especially at 3-0. There's a reason why he was inquiring about Christian, because he's in that spot where he's kind of able to look at the landscape of the league and figure out where his team can be at in the long term. But I really like what he's done. As the Dark Knights mentioned to me earlier this year, what changed in the front office? This seems like a different franchise. And I know we had CFO Gate last year, and his CFO was brought back this year, and it looks like his CFO is off the sauce because it looks like good moves off the charts, value plays all over the board, not spending too much on fab. And this looks like a team that's really destined to go. I will say some karma could be coming his way, because I've never seen someone celebrate a ruptured Achilles more than Chafe Gentleman when Marlon Mack went down with ruptured Achilles.
That helped him out. That helped clear up that backfield.
That was enormous. So I think, Bob, this is going to be your least favorite segment, but we have to hit it. It's the Wall Street Minute. And this is where we talk about fab guidance and kind of fab mischievousness and problems. And if you don't mind, Alex and I are probably going to take care of this one. The most egregious fab prospect thus far is Darrell Henderson. And, you know, Bob, you're more than able to defend it, especially after last week. But Alex, the covering bid was about $50 less than what Darrell went for at $78, and it's put Roz in a position to where, you know, what can he do?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, he was a great pickup, right? The fact that, I mean, Bob, if you really wanted the guy and you thought you needed to spend $78 to get him, first of all, I don't know, maybe you need a math lesson or something like that. But I think the pickup's good. It just sucks that you spent so much money on him. That we've all been there though, right? Where you blow your load, you overshoot the next bidder by $20, $30. It happens. I don't know. I mean, you just got to hope that your roster holds up and you won't need anyone. But I love the pickup. Just the price tag was a bit too high. You never know though. You got to take that opportunity when it's there, right? So I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I dropped him too. I drafted him. So the fact that I dropped him and then spent $78 to get him right back, I should have held him after week one. But my thought process was I was just Le'Veon went down, McCaffrey went down. I think Montgomery was even nicked up too. So I needed a running back, and I was like, my team really can't be in a worse situation later on in the year than it is now with Godwin, Le'Veon, McCaffrey out. So I was like, I got to get my guy. I think it's tough too. Like, obviously it's year 2 of fab, so I think it's tough to know the value of the dollar. But obviously I'm way farther off than other people are right now. So I gotta figure out. I gotta get my quants in line.
Yeah. The quants need to get in line, but I think there's other situations to where you might not be the only one. Justin Jefferson went for $46, and the covering bid was about $25 again. A little less egregious, but still a fascinating play when you're going after the wide receiver 2 in a run first offense, and he's a rookie, and you think he's going to be the savior. But we already hit on Moist, and we'll just let that be. But I do want to hit on one more that I have written down here. Did Benny Snell turn into Saquon Barkley?
You read my mind, Warren. I was hoping I could get to that. Do you guys know how many fantasy points? Do you know how many fantasy points he has in the past 2 weeks?
I dropped
0.2. He has 0.2 fantasy points. He has 10 carries for 16 yards and a fumble in 2 weeks, and Tom spent $27 on him uncontested. So it's like, it feels like one of those scenarios. I don't know what's going on over on Broadway Street on East Broadway with Tom, but he's apparently not paying attention to what's going on, because it seems like Anthony McFarland's the guy there, right? To the handcuff at this point. And you spend $27 for 0.2 fantasy points over 2 weeks. That's awful. That's gonna hurt you down the road.
I don't like how we're talking about all guys I dropped. Literally Henderson, Jefferson. I dropped him too. I dropped all these guys, and Carlos Hyde. I dropped literally every single player that is like high on the waiver priority.
Well, did you send Benny Snell in as like a double agent, like to try to take down?
I mean, I drafted him.
Knockers.
I drafted him in McFarland. I don't hate it from Tom. Like the talks out of camp where Benny Snell was the number 2. And he was like the number 1 waiver wire pickup in other leagues the first week.
Yeah.
And he's got Connor. So he's handcuffing Connor, but I don't think he had to spend a dime on him after that week. Like, he could have just used a waiver if he wanted him. But I don't hate the handcuff move necessarily.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think the last one that we'll hit on is the Jeff Wilson Jr. Pickup. We'll end it with the least egregious one. But Jeff Wilson Jr. was picked up for $18 by House of Pancakes. And I think, as Bob texted me on Sunday, he asked me why I dropped Jeff Wilson Jr. And the fact of the matter was, it was a blowout. Those points were completely cakewalked. He walked in 2 touchdowns. This isn't a guy, especially with Mostert coming back pretty soon and Jarek really kind of taking over that running back position. This isn't a guy to spend on, in my opinion. But I think that's the least egregious one and maybe the most, the most debatable one when it comes to the money given. But, that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see no path to Jeff Wilson ever being used in Landy's lineup, so I'm not sure why you would spend $18 on him.
Yeah.
Like you said, he had 2 touchdowns against the Jets. McKinnon got banged up. Mostert's going to come back. He's got Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, A.J. Brown, Cooks, a lot of good flex options. No reason to spend $18 on that guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're in the same position. And we want to end this League of Shadows ShadowCast episode 1 of 2020 with everyone's favorite segment. It's Yikes. And I think, Bobby, I hope you have your Yikes written down, but if not, then we'll go to Alex first because I know Alex is chomping at the bit to get this Yikes going.
Yeah, go to Alex.
All right. So for my Yikes, I'm going to take a trip back into the basement of the League of Shadows standings. We're going to go back to Moist Towlett. So I think Moist made one very questionable lineup decision this past week. It obviously didn't end up costing him because he got absolutely massacred on the scoreboard. But he decided to start Laviska Shenault over Jerick McKinnon, right? So I think the Yikes is that he makes a nice pick in the draft by picking McKinnon, a guy Shanahan likes, a guy that has a lot of upside if the 2 guys ahead of him get hurt. That happens, right? So he's got a great opportunity to plug McKinnon in, have a reliable RB2 flex option. He's 0-2. His team's reeling. He's got guys hurt. What he needs is a solid, reliable guy that he can plug into his lineup. What he decides to do instead is target the stink bowl on Thursday night, Jaguars versus Dolphins, and throw in Laviska Shenault, pull out Robert Woods, and then end up needing to start Robert Woods in his flex, thus leaving Jerick McKinnon 17 points on the bench. So, this is a league where in most leagues, McKinnon would have been the hottest waiver pickup the week before he got drafted in our league because that's just how things go in this league. And to have the advantage to use him probably for 1 week only and not take advantage of it, that's a yikes.
It's one of those yikes that you really can't recover from. I keep hitting on it. This is starting a flex on a Thursday night game is a yikes in and of itself. And Alex, you pointed out a million other yikes behind that might be more important. But starting that flex on a Thursday night is yikes worthy in and of itself. Bob, I'm going to hit my yikes, and it's going to hit close to home for you, but in a good way. I'm sending my yikes to Here Comes Treble, my esteemed roommate, great kid. But I was the one to get the Christian McCaffrey talks going. Pat O'Reilly came down Monday morning, and we were talking, or Tuesday morning perhaps, and we were talking about his win and my win. And all of a sudden I said, this is an interesting situation. Why not? You're 3-0. Why not text Bob about McCaffrey? I bet, he's a wheeler dealer. It's Trader Roz. He's might be ready to make a move. And I don't know if Jack heard me. I think subconsciously something happened upstairs when Jack was working that he did hear, or McCaffrey was just in the ether and he got all hyped up because of what he did last year. And what you're doing at 1-2 when you only put up over 80 points the last 2 weeks because of Russell Wilson. And granted, it's Russell Wilson, but you're in a position where there's a lot of big problems in your offense, on your fantasy roster that need to be fixed before you start going out trying to get a guy that's really only going to help you week 6 plus. You might be 1-5 by the time McCaffrey comes back. And when I look at that type of deal, it's a decent deal to kind of, sit on and kind of ruminate on and try to figure out who's made the right call. But we look at it right now, you're 1-2 and you're trading for a guy who won't be ready for 2 weeks, or for 2 weeks at the very least. And you're trading 2 startable assets. When you're trading 2 startable assets like that, including the best receiver in the game, perhaps, you're dealing with a whole nother mess that I don't know if Here Comes Treble is able to get out of. He's a hesitant trader, but he goes in for this one and he gets Christian McCaffrey, who's damaged goods, and it's a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprains are a big friggin' deal, okay? I've never had one, but they take forever to recover from everything that I've read about. And this is a huge problem for Michael Thomas. It's a huge problem for Christian McCaffrey. And when you trade for Christian McCaffrey, you better know that week 8 through 10, you're contending for a bye spot, not a playoff spot. And Jack Bissell, Here Comes Treble, great kid, playing for a playoff spot right now, not a bye spot. And when it's all said and done, that trade has to get a yikes from me. Let's see how it works out. But right now, that's right in the yikes column. We're putting that in the bin, and let's see if I have to eat crow later on in the year. But that's a full-on yikes from me. Bob, what do you got?
Yeah, I like your analysis on that. I think he's not going to rush. They're not going to rush him back if they're not a good team, especially he just got paid. I think I was talking to Alex earlier, and he was saying that Christian's probably a type of player that would play no matter what. So I think he might be back like week 7, week 8, but just not a bet I wanted to roll with. So you took my yikes there. I was going to yikes Jack. I guess I will give my yikes to the entire league's Twitter right now. I feel like it's just like me, Warren.
We're just having a conversation on there, us three, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just
like ghosts.
And me sending the Brandon Cooks AJ Green gif a million times. We need more interaction in the league, more chirping, more bad blood. That's what League of Shadows is all about. So I'm giving the entire league a yikes.
I love it. League of Shadows, you're on notice. This is what happens, okay? You all have iPhones. I know that much. You all have Twitter accounts. And I want to see Moise Towlett tweet more. I want to see him get the energy up. I guarantee that clubhouse is down in the dumps right now. I can't even believe what's happening. They don't trust their owner. I've heard a lot of situations about them not trusting their owner, them wanting out. Some of his biggest players too. But when it's all said and done, this is why the league is what it is. We have the interactions, and I think Bob, you got to give big kudos to you today. We brought the energy up. This league has now been awoken. We got out of our quarantine bubble, and we're now starting to see what happens in real life. These are the type of trades that kind of change the entire league's structure and mentality towards the year. So I really appreciate that. And I again, happy as hell to be here. I'm happy that we have a little bit of a scare with the Titans, but it looks like it's going to be all right. But the COVID era looks to be going off without too big of a hitch with League of Shadows, and I think that's all credit to the commish, not Roger Goodell, to the commissioner, Brie Eggs and Hamos, and this is a big deal. We have only one COVID IR spot right now, and I still don't understand it, but that's right.
We'll worry about that when we get there.
Yeah, who is the guy?
Figure it out.
It's on the knockers. It's no, he's gone. The COVID IR spot. So there are no COVID IR spots. So this is all good news. So
right, he's still with us. Raquel Armstead now on the waiver wire with COVID.
Yeah, stay away. 6 feet. So anyway, boys, I really appreciate it. I think this is the inaugural. There's going to be plenty more where that came from. We'll bring on some more guests when it's all said and done. I think TDK, the Dark Knights, will be all done calling it state radio when we let him back on the airwaves. We'll be kind of muting his content, maybe put him on mute every once in a while, but in general, he'll get his word out, and we'll maybe see him at 4-0 or 3-1, and then the pressure will really start mounting, and we'll see what he can deal with. But in general, Bob, thanks for joining us. This has been a long time coming. Alex, as always, trusty co-host, really apprite it, and we will see you guys soon.
Let's hope the boys have 5 hours to listen to this tomorrow. All right, see you guys.